our recording, we can begin.
It should be going.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome everybody to today's MVP Office Hours for April 20th. I am joined today by Dale Ziegler as my technology co-host. Jared should be on if he's not already. He was going to join us for about 30 minutes and then he has another call that he has to jump to. So you should have all three of us for at least a portion of today's call. You're looking at on your screen the standard list of events that we go through every week. I did notice that there are a couple of missing. So if you go to that bit.ly or /SF Dreams, you'll see all of the events listed there. Make sure that you honor the lowercase, uppercase to get to that particular bit.ly. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let's jump right in. So for those of you who are new to this call, oops, I got an error message, hold on. Okay, for those of you who are new to this call, first time attendees, we hold this call the first and third Friday of the month. Our next call is scheduled for May 4th. To get to registration, we always have the same bit.ly, MVP OHUS. This is an open Q&A discussion. You can ask any question that you want. Great opportunity for resources, asking others about their experiences. If we need to get into questions that are a little more complicated, requiring either a screen share or maybe an in-depth process builder, we might suggest that you grab some screenshots and drop those out on community so that the entire global community can provide you some guidance, as well as those who are on the call today. So we are recording. We will post this to community and Twitter. I think everybody is already muted, but just in case, if you guys could just put yourselves on mute, that would be great to manage background noise. If you've got a question or when you're ready to ask a question, please do one of two things. You can either raise your hand in the chat, or if we have dead air, just go ahead and announce yourself and ask your question. You can also post questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring those as well. And everyone, again, is welcome to share their experiences. This is called MVP Office Hours, but it is really an opportunity for us as a community to come together and talk about what we've experienced and what we can share as far as resources as well. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the latest announcement for our global MVP Office Hours. This year, we kind of took on an initiative to expand and take MVP Office Hours across the world. And I'm really happy to announce that APAC has formed a group, and we should be hearing about their actual relaunch date very, very soon. They're learning their technology, choosing their dates, and figuring out how they want to best take questions from the entire APAC region who has multiple languages, and we're gonna try and figure out how to best help everybody when it comes to translations and things like that. So with that, let's go ahead and open up the floor to our first question. And if anybody, let's see, is Jared on the line? Let's confirm that real quick. No.
I am here.
You are here. Fantastic, Jared. Thank you so much for joining us. I thought since you could only spend a little bit of time with us today, we might ask to our audience if they had any questions that were more in your area of expertise, being maybe developer related, community cloud, Flownatics that we have on the line, anything like that you might be able to address. Do we have any of those types of questions? And if we don't, that's okay too. I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to hit those out the gate if we had them.
Actually, I have a Flow question.
All right, great, go ahead.
So yesterday, the team came up to me. They're having problems with the process builder firing on time. And they asked me if I could put it in Flow. Now, I know minimal requirements about this, other than the fact that I have to go from a custom object to the quote line to the quote in order to retrieve values back from the quote, as well as criteria to drive the update. So I wasn't sure off the top of my head if Flow did, if I could use cross objects on the read, or if I have to go to each object individually.
Yeah, so within Flow,
Well, so the scenario is, just to make sure it makes sense, right? The scenario is you're looking at a custom object, something happens and you need to go find the related quote record.
Right. And the only way I can traverse back to that is by grasping the quote line ID to get
Okay.
the quote ID and then go all the way back to the quote to retrieve the fields.
Gotcha. So from a flow standpoint, the way flow looks at it is you've just got to provide it some sort of criteria, right? So if you wanted to find a quote, for example, you would need to have some criteria to find it, right? Whether if you could retrieve the quote ID at the start of the flow, right? You could go find that quote record just simply by querying for that, a quote that has that ID. If you don't, and you, for instance, have just the quote line item record, right? So if it starts there, you would have to do like some traversing within flow to do a lookup. Essentially, you would do a record lookup to find the quote line item that meets, this criteria, right? And you'd be able to do the ID or the custom, that custom object you're using, right? So you'd have to do a lookup there, and you can pass it those parameters using Process Builder. And so, yeah, but within Flow, right, you would have to set a record lookup essentially for each. So you do a record lookup to, find the ID of that quote line item if you didn't already have it from, the Process Builder.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would basically store that, the ID of that quote that is related to that quote line item ID. So whenever you do a record lookup, you can store values of that record that you find within variables in the flow. So you could say, hey, I want to store the, this quote line item's quote ID in its own variable, so that then I can do another record lookup for all, for the quote, essentially, that the IDs match. So it's just a matter of like where you start, right, from an object level, like where that workflow kicks off for that Process Builder. And that determines essentially within Flow, like where you need to start. Because like I said, if you have some IDs already on that record that kicks off the process, then you can easily just pass those IDs into variables within Flow in Process Builder. So whenever you in Process Builder say run a flow, you simply basically it'll ask you, hey, do you want to fill out any variables when you kick off this flow? And then you just select the variables you want to fill in. You select the fields that those variables should be filled with, and then it'll automatically pass those into the flow. And then in your flow, you just use those variables to do your, essentially your criteria, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I did as a POC yesterday. I did individual reads, traversing that way. But what I was wondering, today I was going to actually look and see if I couldn't use, how you use _R dot and then the field name back to the parent. That's what I was going to try and do today. And I thought, I don't even know if that's possible. So just threw out the question.
In Flow or Process Builder?
In Flow.
You can't do the __R.
Correct.
But you can in the Process Builder that awakens Flow, travel up however many objects you need to go get that ID to then pass in as the variable.
All right, 'cause that would save me some I/O, I think.
Well, absolutely. Well, and it also helps you on your overall compiling, because in Flow, within a Flow, you only get to look up, I think, what is it, a total of 100? You can only look up 100 times, or is it 150? But there's a finite number, so that if you eventually start to have to loop through records and you go up maybe 3 objects, that's 3 each time.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
and the other
let
thing,
Process Builder take.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, let Process Builder take that burden, because it can have the ability to go up however many generations of objects you need to go grab that initial ID. Let it take the burden, and then let Flow do all the processing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I could maybe get Process Builder to do my backwards key and then go straight into the quote object for it. All right,
Yeah.
I'll try that.
Can,
Yep.
can you talk about that further, the flow limits? So if I put 100 records in an object and want Flow to process those records, what will happen to those 100 records? Will the Flow will stop?
So it's what exactly are you doing is the question. So for every time the flow iteratively hits a record lookup element, that's one. If you loop through 100 records and that loop has a record lookup every time, that's 1 times 100. And then once it hits that limit, and again, for some reason 100 or 101 is sticking out in my mind. Maybe it's 150, maybe it's 200, but it's somewhere in that range. The whole thing blows up. It stops. It says, sorry, you're done. Versus the fast, where you then get the fasts in there, the fast lookups. That of course is what you need for the loops. But if you are saying take all these records and do the same thing to them, so go do a fast update,
Yes.
that I believe is just one lookup, because you're saying go give me all the records and I'm going to do the same thing to all of them. You only looked it up once. It's when you're processing individual records and potentially applying different values of things to each of those records later, consuming that information that eats up your load.
Yeah. So sorry. So my use case would be I want to fill up an object with records that may match existing contacts in Salesforce. So I'd have like first name, last name, email address, and I want to use those fields and loop through all my contacts to see does that email address exist, yes or no, and if yes, then update the contact.
And you're trying to find just the one unique one, right?
Or the first.
Or the first. Yeah. Well, yeah. So then that would just be a record lookup that you would do there, because you're only trying to find the one specific record, right?
Yep.
You're not trying to find a group of records.
Well, and actually, depending on what it is that you're trying to do, you can actually kind of cheat the system, do a record lookup, and if you have like 3 records that match that same criteria, well, no. Yeah, never mind. Forget it. I just said those last 8 words. I was thinking
because and the reason why I asked
that's where you can cheat the system.
Yeah, I've heard this before a couple other times where I'm trying to build a flow doing exactly this, of populating an object with, say, 100 records at a time and seeing if they'll match up to an existing contact. And I've been told a couple times that, yep, you can do that in Flow, but you will hate it because it's not going to handle 100 records or more very well.
Yeah, so Stuart, I've done essentially almost that same use case, and I haven't really run into troubles with it personally, and I've done it to where it does a couple different tries, right? It if you give it a first name and last name, the first try it does is by both first name and last name to see if it can find a record that meets both those criteria. Okay, if I can't find that one, if I can't find it on that try, right, then try with just the last name and see what I find there, and then present the user a list of records if more than one comes back, right? So you can kind of iterate on it, but I haven't run into any limitation issues.
It's this. I think it's the successful acquisition of data from a lookup record that then eats into your limit. Does that make sense? If you do a record lookup where the criteria matches, whether it's on a specific ID or name or whatever,
Yep.
And then you take those values from that detail record, put them in variables, whatever. That successful hit counts as one. And then within a single run of a flow, your limit is 100 of those successful hits, I believe.
Oh. Okay. So that's why you were saying
now maybe, and so maybe an unsuccessful hit does still eat into your limit. So like, I don't know if you can see my screen, but I'm trying to write, we're going to pretend that we're dumping first and last name variables in, and nothing like going on the go. But so like, let's say this is my first flow element, and then we have a decision element that says, did you find an ID? Yes or no? If yes, great, go do something. If no, we'll go try to find some other criteria. I don't know if that if no would count as 2 in the end, or still just 1 because this first go around didn't find you something. Then you went into your decision element that said, yeah, no, you didn't find it. Go try this lookup, and then you're successful. I don't know if that counts as 1 or 2. I've never actually had to play with that.
So, right. That's the problem. Is that it's the if no. So okay, this is where. So if yes, that's great. Then do something. If no, then look for something else. And then did that match? If yes, then do your thing. If no, then look for something else. And it's that how many times can you look for something else to be the match before you run into your limit of number of things you can do.
Which I think that's pretty high, because like I said, the scenario I did, it was not just first and last name. Like it was like an insurance type deal where you had like a policy number, you had address, you had all this information that the user could fill out. So I had a ton of branching within there, right? To try to find a record in any potential scenario that could be, right? So I think you're pretty safe.
We need to have a call, because I want to see whatever I can see as far as what you built. I'd love to like gain knowledge about that.
Yeah.
Because this is exactly the one. It's like, well, start with email if you have email. Start with phone, or then try phone if you have phone. Then try first name, last name, and the zip code if you've got those things. Like what data do I have access to? I'd like to try them all and see what matches.
Yeah, let's do it.
For the benefit, go ahead.
I was just gonna say at a higher, broader flow level, the flow project managers or product managers at Salesforce are openly receiving suggestions and ideas right now through a handful of MVPs and others like Flownatic kind of people. And a lot of things that have been suggested have been around actually, so when you build a flow, tell me if I have any risk of hitting any limits. Like if you build a flow with a bunch of lookup elements and trying to put together an algorithm that says, here's your risk of this actually working. Because there's nothing more deflating than you spend all this time building a flow, it's super duper awesome, and then you realize it doesn't work because you hit those limits. A lot of those ideas have been suggested to then help actually refine flow building for those kinds of processes. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? So it's in their ears. So safe harbor.
That would be amazing. I mean, the risk of getting into something that's not bulkified, not performant, can't scale, right? I mean, that's so kind of the toughest thing about using flows and process builder. That would be an amazing feature.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I've been clamoring for, is, all right, your flow, like it doesn't work within the governance limits. Help me make that code. Like essentially flow is you're building a procedural code. Somehow translate that to code to then get you started on the development. And that's free education right there. I don't know how to write code, but I'd sure love to learn how. I tried to build this, walk me through it. And there it is. So,
go ahead.
And so the thing that I was also told by another MVP was if I can build it in just the proof of concept, if I can build it in Flow, then I can print that out and work with a very good developer and they can look at my flow and say, yeah, this is easily translatable to code, and here's how we can do it. So I haven't gotten there yet, but I've been told that that is probably a good way of setting up the mapping of how the process is supposed to work.
And I was going to ask, just for the benefit of the 24 or 5 people on the line that may not be familiar with Flow, if somebody could define, when would you use Flow versus when would you use Apex?
I mean, I would
Is that
use Flow if you don't know code. That's the right out of the box one. But
under what circumstances is Flow appropriate, or what does Flow accomplish?
Well, Flow kind of goes back to, in my opinion, I mean, take this for what it's worth. Flow goes back to the core functionality. Anything that you build in Salesforce, anything that you know you need to customize and configure, start as simple as you possibly can before you go to a more complex, complicated, difficult solution. And the reason I say that with Flow versus code is because with Flow, because there are governance limits, if you're trying to accomplish smaller jobs, smaller batches of data, don't go all the way out to code when Flow gives you the ability to manage those small jobs. Once you're in code, you're kind of committed to code.
Let me rephrase my question, because we know with Process Builder we can update fields, we can send out emails, we can do things. What can we do with Flow? I'm hearing you talk about doing a lot of lookups, but then what are we doing? Are we updating? Are we merging fields? What are the actions that Flow can do?
The things that
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say making decisions and looping through a number of records that maybe Process Builder could not. Process Builder may look for a specific thing and then update it, whereas, and maybe I'm wrong here, but Flow can loop through a number of different records and find the right one and bring it back and work on that one.
Yeah, so like Dale, if you cancel out of that window there, like if you look on the left-hand side there, right, there's a lot of things you can do within Flow, right? You can do kind of your standard like find a single record and update that record, or create a single record, and then you have the record delete there as well. So, which I think that's pretty new, right, Dale? Because I don't think
deletes.
Has that always been there?
Delete's always been there, but then you start to get into what's running the flow. Is it in classic days, if it's behind a button, it's taking the permissions of the running user. If it's an auto launch flow behind a process builder, it's a system level flow, which means even if you don't have delete permissions, you actually do because the system does.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got like everything you see there, and then you have what Stuart was talking about is like sets of records, right? So you think about being able to, like one of the classic examples I can think of is like quote line items. Like, okay, if I update the quote, or if I do some of the quote right, maybe I want to go through and find line items that meet certain criteria. And that's where the loop comes in, right? Where I can loop through a set of records and say, hey, pick out the ones that meet this criteria, and then add those to a set that I can then update, this one field for all of those records. Excuse me. So, that's something you can do with it, right? Obviously the screen interaction piece of being able to take what a user gives you and then on the screen and do something with it, and then like you have all the decision making, capabilities in there as well. And there's some cool things too, like that I don't think a lot of people see is like within the screen element that you can do a dynamic record choice. So you can actually bring up like a choice of records based upon criteria. So you could, say, hey, I found all these records. Which one do you want to update? And they select that record, and you can record it and update it.
Yeah, one of the more common use cases for that is you prompt asking for a last name. Okay, Smith. You can then go automatically query and return all contacts whose last name is Smith, and then you can allow the user to choose, do you want Joe Smith? Do you want Jenny Smith? Do you want Bob Smith? And then on the back end, it knows what you've related to, and you go on with the flow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did it one the other day where for a customer, it was like they needed to actually update like all potential opportunity line items for an account that met certain criteria at the account level. So what's nice about that is then with a flow, I was able to just go do a basically a query for all line items related to that account that meet, this criteria, and then I showed them a list and said, okay, which one do you want to update? And then they select it, and they enter the information they want to update, and it updates, right? So that's the thing you could do with Flow, where that takes you like an hour to build or so. So yeah, it's.
But Jackie, going back to the question of when would someone use Flow versus code, there's also then the third player in their Process Builder. All three do actually have considerably different capabilities. Flow, the other huge advantage to Flow is just like code, you can go all over your org. You don't have to have things related to each other to still do stuff.
Yep.
You can be living in account and contact land and then hop over to some custom object that's not related to anything and back and forth. As long as you know what the business process that you're trying to develop towards, you can do that in Flow. Nothing within the Flow has to be related to each other, and you can still accomplish your job. Flow versus Apex is then, again, how much data are you actually playing with? If you don't have to go into the complexity of code, then don't. Flow is still much more scalable and tenable in the big picture because it is point and click. It's drag and drop. It's not subject to tests like class tests when you deploy from sandbox to production. And then the difference between Flow and Process Builder, even though Process Builder is built on the Flow platform, Process Builder is not very different than Workflow, where you're either on your object that you're coming from, or you're traveling up or down. You can't go across your org. You're still, for the most part, confined to that branch of the relational database.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. And hopefully that helps anybody who might not have explored the Flow or maybe even Process Builder yet. I don't know if the people on the line, if what your experience is, but hopefully that might be something new that you haven't heard of before, and now you've got something to go and explore. Go ahead.
Yeah, and there's some killer stuff, like just with the updates to Flow and things like Lightning Flow, that I think in updates to the Flow Designer that are coming down the line, right? Those things are going to take this to just the next level where you can start to, really even more so mesh that, times where, hey, I have a flow, but this one part of the flow really needs to be a little bit more extensive than what Flow can provide me from a screen standpoint and a logic standpoint. So then I could put a Lightning component within that flow, using Lightning Flow, right? And then I've got this flow that, walks me through a path, but it's, from a user standpoint, has a lot more extendability. So you can kind of mix the two together to get an even more powerful flow.
Great, thank you. We've been on this subject for a bit, and we do have somebody's hand up. Do you mind if we move on to somebody else's question? If we want to come back to Flow and Process Builder, we can certainly do that. Chris, you're still on the line. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, guys. My question relates to notes and attachments, and then moving over to the Lightning files and what's the other piece? And enhanced notes. If I migrate over to Lightning, is this something I still need to address, or is that taken care of if I migrate over to a Lightning and allowing my users Lightning access?
Are you talking about your historical notes and attachments?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I believe that you have to use, you have to migrate those notes from notes to files.
No, I think you can. Oh, you do? Okay. I thought you could still access them. You just couldn't create new.
Yeah, the related lists, Yeah, it just doesn't. I think the list is there. It just doesn't have a upload or attach or anything. But I would say, it'd be best to just migrate them over, and then just get rid of the list. I just put the thing in the library or in the chat. Doug Ayers created a tool to convert attachments to Salesforce files.
Okay.
And that has a lot of good reviews on it.
And there's something called Magic Mover too, right? We just recently heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one I've been using. It works really well.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So yeah, you can use those tools to just move that stuff over, and then start using the new notes object in files.
And Jared, you say delete the old ones after you do the migration and you've confirmed that you now have basically a duplicate. You are suggesting that people go and delete the old original notes?
Well, migrate them over. So what a lot of people end up doing, and I don't know on the Magic Mover, I haven't looked at that one, but I know for like the notes piece, what I've seen is you can migrate those to like a PDF and then, migrate those over. But yeah, in general, I would just move them. Personally, I would just move them all over. That way you can get rid of the old list and keep moving forward with the new one.
Is it actually making a duplicate copy of it, or is it just reassociating?
It's copy. Well, Magic Mover is a copy.
Okay, so then it sounds like you probably would want to then physically delete the original notes so that you free up your storage space.
But yeah, because they're separate objects,
Yes.
aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they are separate.
So I added another link from Doug Ayers. Once you have migrated to files, your users will notice that in Lightning, in Classic, they're used to seeing attachments rolled up to the account if they're on a child object. Like if attachments are on contacts or on opportunities, they may be used to seeing all of those attachments rolled up to the account. In files, those do not, and that's on design by Salesforce. So this link here at the bottom talks about another custom component that you can add to your Lightning page that will expose files on child objects to the account.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys.
All right, awesome. We'll make sure that we make all of these links available too when we post the recording so that they'll be easy for everyone to get to. All right, thank you for that discussion. Anybody else have a question on any topic? We've got a big group today. You guys have got to have questions, I'm sure. I'm going to look at the chat and see if we have anything.
I have another question, and I think it's Jared had helped me in the past with the log-on screen for a community. I haven't had a chance to look back at the demonstration, but I think, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, to move the login screen from the directly in center to left or right, was that CSS coding or was it something else I need to look at?
Jared, are you still on the line? Oh, I think he might have had to hop off.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries.
We can certainly sync you guys up afterwards as well. And Raphael had a statement here. Raphael, yes, you can unmute yourself because he had a question regarding files as well. Raphael? You may not be dialed in with your audio, so go ahead and ask your question in the chat, and I'll be happy to read that off. And while you get that going, there was somebody else who I saw their hand was up. Looks like they've either gotten their answer or changed their mind. Anybody else have a question? Okay, Dale, why don't we go to the questions that somebody had submitted? While you're pulling that up, Christy has a question. What are others doing about screen printing in Lightning? Ooh. Screen printing in Lightning. Christy, can you elaborate a little bit? And Christy, if you want, I think you can take yourself off mute. All right, well, while we're waiting for her response, it looks like Raphael says, so what's the cost of Files Connect and how does it compete against tools such as MuleSoft? I have no idea about the cost of either of those. Does anybody have any experience with those? We might be having some audio issues. Hold on one second. So John is telling me he has no mic access today. I don't have a question, but I wanted to tell everyone that I presented my implementation plan to directors today and knocked it out of the park. Good job, John. Congratulations. That's great. Great way to end a week. Fantastic. All right, let's see here. Dale, will you confirm your mic works? Because I'm not hearing anything.
That's because I was on mute and struggling to find the phone app on my phone.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure. Dead silence was worrying me. Okay. I don't see. So Kristen Bryan is saying that he uses a free app called Printable View from High Tech Pro. So that might be something that you can look at. All right, so she says from reports you can use, or you used to have a printable view. Oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. You don't have that in Lightning anymore. Also,
I don't think that's in Lightning. I don't think that's made it to Lightning yet.
Okay. We'll have to check the roadmap and see if that is on the list. Dale's going to look and see if we can find it.
Yeah. Reports printable view, that looks like a checkbox under summer. So not too far.
All right.
Sandboxes go to summer in 18, productions go in June.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Kristen. Okay. All right, anybody else? Let's scroll back through. All right, I don't see any hands raised. Raphael did
So I
say,
captured.
go ahead.
Oh, no, if we were looking for something, I did capture those other two questions that we got in the email.
Okay, okay, we'll get 2 seconds. Let's, Raphael did post, he said he believes we missed something, an important consideration on the flow versus the code question. Order of execution for multiple flows is not guaranteed. So you would need to rewrite and consolidate multiple flows if execution order is a concern. Otherwise, APACS would be required. Okay, that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that, Raphael. All right, let's go to the 2 questions that were submitted. Dale, do you want to go ahead and take those?
Sure. All right. I have a pick list with about 10 different onboarding stages, fields on account. Kanban feature to move the cards through each various stage. I'd like to see how long each pick list stays in each stage, both for reporting, the average time, the stage is X, but also, so we look at Kanban board, we can see, we actually talked about this because 0 days have passed because we just moved it on. Let's move on to the next card. Well, so.
This sounds like velocity, or it reminds me of a velocity report or velocity metrics. If we're thinking of
yeah. So, yeah, and I mean, one very easy solution to get through part of this, the average amount of time in each stage, that's turning on field history tracking on that particular field, and then running a report on the account history tracking. I think that's exactly what it's called, account history object. And because then you can say, you can start to filter off of what was the old value of the field, what was the new value of the field. It's still linear because it's going record to record, but that would be your object that would store that data. And then, and I'm shooting from the hip here with my eyes closed, which means I'm thinking harder. But I would think that might be something to then send out to Excel to get you like better ways to manipulate. But the first piece of standard functionality is field history tracking on that pick list and then running reports off the account history object on old value, new value.
Yeah, I did a project years ago on the opportunities. So it was the same type of thing where they wanted to see how many days an opportunity sat at each stage. So the way that we tackled it was we created custom fields that date stamped every time the field changed, and then there was a calculation field to subtract the difference. And I believe we also had a rule that would not allow you to go in reverse. So you could not back out of a stage after it was set. I don't remember that we ever got to any kind of reporting what you do with that data after you can see it, record by record, but at least you had that data parsed out. And then they decided to move on to something else. But that was one way. And I don't recall why we didn't look at field history tracking. I think it was because we couldn't see that on an individual record and do calculations based on those system date stamps.
Well, you mean on the history object? Yeah, you can't develop on that object, even begin to try to do math, and you're going record from record. John, first, I'll throw you a bone here. Somebody's watching me. All right, you put in the chat that you've done this before. I'm guessing maybe on the account object. If you want to unmute, it might not be the solution, but it might help point us in the right direction. Can't unmute. Okay. Hey, moving desks and no mic. I mean, it sounds like what John put in the chat would mean putting some additional fields on the account object, which, I mean, it's doable, especially if you have, if you have rules in place that say you can't go backwards in your stages. That does put some guardrails around things, but you're creating additional fields, you're creating additional formulas. You can do math on date timestamps. It's just the most painful experience besides reporting on multi-pick lists, but it can be done. So.
I have a feeling that we're having audio issues, which has to do with our account today, not participants, since I can't unmute anybody, and I don't know why. So I apologize for that. Technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't, the world comes to a halt.
That's so weird, though, that we obviously had people unmuted earlier, so I don't know what happened.
I think those people called in on an actual landline. or cell phone.
This is Pat. I'm able to unmute with no problem.
Oh,
Are
then
you on the
Pat,
phone
while
or
you're at
computer?
it-
No, I'm just on my computer.
well,
I'm
while
good.
you're- Yeah. Okay, that's weird. I don't understand. Then there's gremlins, I guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was able to unmute earlier.
Okay. All right. Well, so for those of you who can unmute, what you want to talk about? And then it goes silent again.
This is Pat. I don't have a specific question. I've just been working. I've finished up an app that I'm about to submit to App Exchange, and so and this is my first app. This is the first time I've ever tried to package anything, and it's quite the learning process.
That's fantastic. You've been working on that for a bit. I remember you asking security review questions, the process,
Right.
a couple calls ago. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm getting close. I'm getting close, and every day it's a challenge to restrain myself from adding that one more feature that would just make it that much better.
Well, that's what version 2's for, right?
What's that?
That's what version 2's for.
I guess so. Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, good luck and congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And it's been quite the learning experience. In the last 6 weeks, I have changed over from IntelliJ to VS Code so that I could sort of do best practices with Salesforce DX, which I learned in the last 6 weeks. And so it's been quite the learning experience.
That's fantastic.
I'm looking at the chat. Looks like Raphael asked if anyone knows about Files Connect or MuleSoft and the costs of each. And I just would answer, I don't know anything about MuleSoft or the costs, but didn't want you to miss that comment in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're all agreed. We don't know much or anything about the cost of those.
Just an aside,
So we
I think
should probably start.
I was just going to say MuleSoft, I think, is presenting at the San Francisco Developers User Group next week, and they do videotape those and put those online. So for anybody interested in MuleSoft, that should be up in about a week and a half.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pat. All right. Anybody else have a question or a topic?
Is the MuleSoft question just about cost? We do use
Yeah.
MuleSoft. I mean, I could jump in. If it's not too incredibly deep in the weeds, I might know something about it.
Raphael was just asking about the cost for, I'm scrolling to try and find the question again. He was just asking about the cost difference between that and Files Connect.
Yeah, I don't know much about Files Connect, but I mean, I do know that for MuleSoft, I think at least for the way we're using it, it's somewhere in the sort of 70,000 per year range, which is a full enterprise kind of thing. So just, I don't know if that helps with your ballparking, but that's like our all-you-can-eat buffet, enterprise version of that. And we're using it for a lot of applications, not just Salesforce. It's for kind of eventually to be like a whole data integration orchestration ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. John Graff has a question. What is a good cost per license on a CTI connector? I think free is a good price, but I don't know that we can get that.
Nothing free is ever great. You get what you pay for when it comes to that space.
All right, I'll concede that's true. Does anyone have experience with CTI connectors?
We're moving in that direction. Sorry, I don't have so we're testing out CTI connection in our service console, and we're looking at using Amazon Connect CTI. I have no idea what the cost is on that, but just involved in the integration piece.
I've worked with a couple of CTIs, Avaya, and I don't recall the other one. But Avaya at the time was much easier, straightforward, and reliable to work with.
Great, thank you. I would make the recommendation that with any of these, that you, before you sign a contract, and this is my hard and fast rule with any vendor, any type of technology, is that it needs to be installed and fully functional in my sandbox with any customizations as a proof that what the salesperson agrees it can do, the engineers can actually support. So that's my recommendation, is make sure that it's not just the vanilla what everybody gets is in your sandbox, but any of your customizations that you require is fully functional in your sandbox, and they prove to you that it does what you ask them to do. It looks like we have a conversation in the chat about Apttus X Author. Stuart, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so
Since I know you have a mic.
yeah, we've been using XAuthor, very nice tool. So XAuthor allows us to see our Salesforce data in Microsoft Excel, and then also build these templates for users to look at specific data like campaign data, for example, and then do updates on that in Excel and hit a button to submit that back into Salesforce. It's very, very useful. However, we were using it in Classic, and XAuthor templates are saved in Classic as attachments. And as we mentioned earlier, we've moved from attachments to files. And I've noticed that those same things in files, the same templates in files, don't work with XAuthor. And so I knew that John had used XAuthor in the past. I'll have to jump back and forth to Classic to Lightning to manage templates. That is, okay. That's fine, I guess, for now. Disappointing, yes. So hopefully Apttus will change that to use files in the future.
All right, great. Thank you.
Just call Eric Dreshfield, bug him about it. He'll wave his magic wand.
I was tempted whether or not we should throw out his name.
When in doubt, throw out his name.
There you go.
You can tell him I said that.
All right. Okay, I think we've got one more question, Dale, that was submitted.
From Eve?
Yes.
New to Salesforce. Welcome. You've made the right choice. I'm interested in uploading a list of contacts from CSV to Salesforce, CSV to Lightning. Looks like she used the data import wizard, 1,500 contacts to upload. Some accounts contacts are new to us. Some we already have in our instance. Want to make sure I'm not creating duplicates. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, that sounds like it should be a simple option. Admittedly, it's been a very long time since I've used the data import wizard to know dupe matching, dupe prevention, all of that, without then also knowing what duplicate rules do you already have built into your org. Don't know if you're using external IDs to help facilitate the upsert process. And even then, I don't know if that's a thing in the import wizard, and I'm talking data loader. So I'm going to punt and defer.
If I were tackling this particular project, I would dedupe my my spreadsheet first against all of the records in the spreadsheet. And then I would look at the native duplicate management functionality and make sure that that's turned on and that's being utilized. And rather than using the import wizard, I would use data loader. For me, that has always been the safer, more comfortable tool to use because I can see everything I need to see, and I make sure that something's not getting imported incorrectly.
I'll throw out a
Likewise,
vote for
I concur with
demand
that.
tool. I mean, it's not cheap, it's not free, but it is so nice to use and pretty low skill. So I'll just plug that one.
Which tool was it, Corey?
Demand tools. I'm a huge fan. I'm a little biased though because I work in education and nonprofit, and they give it away for free. But in the commercial space, I know it costs some money.
But it is a phenomenal tool. I
It is a
agree with you,
phenomenal
Corey.
tool. Save you so much time.
Oh, absolutely. I think unfortunately with this ask with a new admin, is Eve on the call, or are we
I
handing
don't
this
think
answer
so.
back?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're just,
I'll
I'll let her know that it's here.
No problem. I mean, I think unfortunately there's going to be a degree of manual work unless there's already duplicate rules in place in the org that either data loader or the data import wizard would catch. Yeah, you're looking at a considerable amount of manual scrutiny in Excel first, which are they doing? They're doing accounts and contacts. So, I mean, then, yeah.
That's where your
awesome.
duplicate management rules will catch any of that, because you can set it up so that it applies to anybody who's doing the import. I would do a test first, but anybody who's doing the import, it will catch those and then do whatever it is that you tell it to do. Either block them, which I would assume that's what you'd want to do, or you can allow them, but add them to a report that then the admin can go in and look at and see where those duplicates are, and then decide what to do with those duplicates to decide which one wins, and merge them. The other thing that we haven't talked about is in her question here, she doesn't mention which edition of Salesforce that she is on. So if she is on Professional Edition, you're going to have to use Data Loader IO. And I think now our only option, because I don't believe Configure as Data Loader works. It requires an
Data Loader definitely, Apex Loader definitely does not work on Professional, but you still get Data Import Wizard, do you not?
Well, that's the native tool within Salesforce. Yes, that's the one that I'm always leery of, just because I feel like there's opportunity to mess it up compared to the way that I've trained myself just using data loaders, because I can see things in columns. And the last time I looked at the data loader, the field mapping was like sectioned or something. It was multiple screens, and that just might be my personal preference though, because of the way that I started doing it, and I just continued over the last 10 years. All right. I guess that's it on that subject. All right, I think we got time for one more question or topic. Let's see, I don't see any hands raised. Raphael says, I've seen designs implemented staging objects to dedupe records before integrating and inserting in bulk into an actual S object. Huh.
Is that talking about sort of staging data within Salesforce before transforming it? Is that kind of where you're going?
It kind of sounds like maybe it's a holding tank for everything that is new.
Right. Yeah, and I've definitely had to do that before. And part of that has to do with the systems you control, right? So if you control the source, you control the middle part, the integration layer, you control the Salesforce side. Sometimes you can sort of make the best technical choice, but if you only control the Salesforce side and you can't really do a lot of ETL in between, that can be a really good design pattern. Staging the data in Salesforce, using Salesforce automation to transform it into what you need it to be. That can be a really good choice.
Interesting. I'm trying to visualize what that would look like in a process visual. So the data comes into a custom object, and then you run some sort of flow, Apex script, whatever, that says go out and find these duplicates based on this criteria, and then apply these rules.
Yeah, I mean, once it's in Salesforce, you can use any of the automation options to transform the data as you need using, part of it is folks may have the skills to maintain that. If they're, if it's a Salesforce team doing the maintenance, that's another thing. So it's not always control. Sometimes it's just where are the skills of the team. So that internal ETL can be a really good design pattern. There's even pieces of like nonprofit success pack where that's kind of built in, where data is actually staged and transformed as part of the normal sort of data in method. So that can be a really good design pattern. It's not necessarily the most efficient. It definitely takes up storage, but you don't need sort of expensive ETL tools in between. And if your team has a lot of Salesforce skills, it's using skills they have. So that can be a good option.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to give that some thought.
I mean, this is what I'm going through right now is the decision of we have data in a number of different places right now, Eventbrite and our guest registration system and our volunteer system and all these different systems holding data about people. And I want to just bring them all into Salesforce. So the question is, do I find an ETL tool that will do that matching, merging, and find those duplicates before it puts it into Salesforce, or just go ahead and put it into Salesforce into the staging table and then figure out, like we were saying earlier, a flow that we can build that will find and match these people and then assign them to the correct contacts or create new contacts through that flow. And it's a build or buy question, and then how much time will it take to build that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a legit design pattern, and a lot of it has to do with the skills of the folks working on it. If most people have Salesforce skills, that would allow them to build it and maintain it. You're going to incur storage hits, so it may not be the most performant or scalable thing. If you're talking about a lot of records, right, you're going to chew up a lot of your API calls. You might be kind of running up against limits on the system, right? So it's not going to go high scale, but if the numbers are low, that's where your skills are. That's the side of the system you control, and you kind of don't have the ability to necessarily transform it on the way in. It's a legit design pattern, and I've had a lot of success with it.
Very interesting concept. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at 2 minutes past the hour, and I certainly don't want to keep people longer than we had promised. This was some great conversation today. So many things that we haven't touched on before. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you mark your calendar for our meetings in May. And with that, I'm going to give you the rest of your weekend back. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.